I am speaking with,
Graham Mackintosh from IBM Corporation.
and Graham, you gave a great presentation about social media analytics. And the one thing that I was really jazzed about was you were talking about, we're measuring all these things out there. And, the other part of that whole measurement is the people interacting with the things. And we can measure that too. And use the example of traffic. What do we know more about traffic because people are talking about it?
Well, I think that you're right. We already know a fair amount about traffic. Of course, we've got instrumented road systems. You've got telemetry coming from sensors in the road and so on. But people tweet about their driving experience. They blog about it. There's just tons of content wherever you live that is people sharing their commuting experience. And so beyond just the data of traffic flow and the raw numbers, there's the frustration of certain routes or what people find about the driving conditions in different weather, for example, if it's been raining and so on. So in fact, a lot can be gleaned from social media analysis, and it's really when you marry these two things together where you get a complete picture. And that's really at the heart of our Intelligence Operations Center for Smarter Cities. That's exactly.
Hold on. So actually, let me pause you there for a second. So can you give me any example of now that we're listening to people on Twitter and wherever else, we know this about traffic versus we didn't know, or like I can predict that this road's going to be sinking because people are fearing driving on the 101 or something like that?
Well, I hear you. So give me a before and after. So I think a really good example is what we did around the analysis we did, in fact, for India, in various cities in India, because they've just got huge urban growth challenges confronting them. And at the launch of our Smarter Cities initiative in India, just this last September, with social media analysis as a part of it, we really showed the before and after picture. We were able to show that there was really high affinity, for example, in certain cities for weather-related challenges, in terms of poor drainage, for example, on roads. It correlated very well with monsoon seasons that impacted certain cities versus others, and it really gave an opportunity for the first time for cities to start to compare what commuters felt in different urban centers and share best practices around that.
One of the other things you mentioned was the fact that people really only participate in social media when they're on either side of the extreme. They love it or they hate it. There's nothing in between. But when you measure things like traffic, you're measuring good and bad times and boring times for that matter. So how do you, I guess, weigh that appropriately? If people aren't talking about the mundane times, how does that factor into the equation, or is there a way to level it? I mean, how do you manage that?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, here's what's interesting is as social media really kind of picks up and becomes just a mainstream part of our life, it's working its way into every nook and cranny of what we do. So that kind of plus versus minus extreme, that's leveling out over time. Day by day, week by week, people are tweeting and blogging even in the quote boring things. So that's part one. The need to do this kind of statistical correction is being reduced. But the main point is when you're dealing with volumes on the scale that we're talking about, there is this kind of middle ground. There are people posting about, hey, the drive home was way better. That's what I would have expected. Let's say on the topic of commuting. So, and you can start to say, well, statistically, if the pluses and minuses are where they are, what would we, using statistical models, what would we kind of expect that sort of, call it the silent middle ground to be? And derive some correlations from that. It's a bit of an art, but it can be done. And just to circle back to my opening point, it's less and less true. It's social media and the amount we post about our everyday lives, it's just going up, and it gives a much more clearer and clearer view into human interaction and the way we live.
Excellent. Hey, Graham, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. It's great to talk to you.